Brothers and sisters, how wonderful that we are gathered here today at St. Joseph's Church in Training in outback Western Australia to celebrate not only Divine Mercy Sunday, but also the 100th anniversary of our beloved church, named in honour of St. Joseph. In today's Gospel we encounter the so-called doubting Thomas, who couldn't believe that Jesus had risen from the dead, unless he saw the holes that the nails made in his hands, and could put his finger into the holes they made, and his hand into his side. Interestingly, we see that Jesus did not treat Thomas with the same disdain that he did the Pharisees and Sadducees, who were also seeking a sign in order to believe. Instead, Jesus came back 8 days later and fulfilled Thomas's request. In a sense, the same happened with St. Joseph, who, after finding out that Mary was pregnant, decided to separate from her. He could not believe at that time that Mary was innocent of any infidelity. Again, instead of sideswiping Joseph, God sent an angel in a dream to open his eyes and heart to belief in the same way that Jesus did with Thomas. So why did God give a second chance to Thomas and Joseph and not to the Pharisees and Sadducees? Jesus' response to their request probably tells us much. He said, "A wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign," and gave them no sign. Joseph, we know, was a humble, righteous and faithful man, and so was given a sign. We can probably presume that Thomas was also humble and faithful, and it was with this disposition that he proclaimed that he had to see for himself. For it was doubting Thomas, after all, who said, "Let us also go so that we may die with him." Brothers and sisters, today we celebrate Divine Mercy Sunday, so declared by Pope John Paul II and as desired by Jesus through St. Faustina. Jesus in the 1930s, just before World War II, wanted to remind the world of his infinite mercy. He used St. Faustina, a humble and faithful nun, to bring the message and sign for our times, though she herself was also filled with doubts during her experiences. It was during these same years that the sisters of another great saint, St. Mary MacKillop, the Josephites, lived and taught in the convent and school next door. Mary and her sisters were also messengers of the love and mercy of God. There are many quotes of St. Mary that tell us of the mercy of God that was very much reflected in her life and the lives of the nuns that followed her. Some of the more famous ones are, "Never see a need without trying to do something about it," or "Seek first the poorest, most neglected parts of God's vineyard," or "Love one another, bear with one another, and let charity guide you in all your life." And this was what she and her sisters did. They left their homes in Ireland, Eastern Australia and other parts of the world and came out into the very isolated central wheat belt town to provide education, love and compassion for not only the children of the area, but also for the townspeople themselves. They did what the early Christians did, as we heard in the first reading. They all lived together and owned everything in common. They sold their goods and possessions and shared out the proceeds among themselves according to what each one needed. The sisters were a light in the darkness of doubt and unbelief. We thank them for all that they did for the community and also in their support for our beloved church, named in honour of their patron, St. Joseph. Though I wasn't here in those early days, I'm sure that those of you who were can attest that the nuns were always supporting their wider parish, preparing for Mass, polishing the brass, and carefully tending to the linens which were stained with the body and blood of our Lord Jesus. Brothers and sisters, though we may look at the surrounding empty blocks today and lament the loss of these Christian pioneers, we need not be afraid, for Jesus promised that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. And here we are 100 years and 1 day after this church was blessed, and Christ is still present here in Training, hidden behind the species of bread and wine, substantially present, body and blood, soul and divinity. And if you should be having any doubts of the truth of that core and central teaching of the Church on the Eucharist, it's okay, for as I said earlier, it wasn't also Thomas who doubted, but St. Joseph as well. Today we come together to pray for all the parishioners who ever set foot in our church, that the divine mercy falls copiously upon their souls, and also for all of us here today, that any of our doubts may be allayed. doubts about Christ's presence, doubts about Christ's never-failing love and mercy, doubts about whether the church will survive the current spiritual drought the world is experiencing. For we are all created in the image and likeness of God, and as the Penny Catechism states, God made me to know him, love him, and serve him in this world, and to be happy with him forever in the next. So no amount of drought will ever quench the thirst that firstly Jesus has for us, and that ultimately we will have for him. May God bless you all for coming from all over the state to be here with us today, as we celebrate Divine Mercy Sunday on this special moment in the history of training and the Catholic Church in the bush.